Africa's march towards modernization is currently playing out on two vastly different stages. The Grand Diplomatic Summit in Nairobi and Beijing that promised a new era of prosperity, and the raw frontline friction of bulldozers and protest lines in Lagos and Washington, D.C. These aren't isolated incidents. They are the growing pains of a continent trying to leapfrog decades of underdevelopment while still wrestling with the foundational demons of institutional trust, the regulatory gridlock, and the protection of private capital. Today, we look past the headlines to ask, is this the cause of progress, or is it a sign that our development model is fundamentally missing them? Hello wavers, you are welcome to Waves Daily, a platform dedicated to helping Africans and the global African diaspora understand how the world works and how to navigate it intelligently. We go beyond headlines to break down the political, economic, and social forces shaping the world today and how they directly impact Africa and Africans everywhere. So, if you're not already part of the family, do me a quick favor. Hit that subscription button right now, and while you are there, tap the notification bell so you never miss a new video when it drops. We post daily, and trust me, you don't want to be the last one hearing about these stories. Now, let's get interactive wavers. Drop in the comments right now where you're watching from, and what's happening in your city, in your town, or the corner of the world, big or small. Politics, vibes on the streets, social issues, celebrations, anything. Bring it to our notice because we read every single one and sometimes even feature them in our future videos. I am your host, Iyanoluwa Bamishile, and I'm super excited to dive into today's headlines with you. Let's go. Today, April 20, 2026, a coalition of Nigerian diaspora investors and stakeholders connected to Winhomes Global Services Limited, also known as Winhomes Estate, is staging a high-profile protest and world press conference near the White House in Washington, D.C. They are demanding justice, they are demanding full accountability, and prompt compensation for what they described as the unlawful demolition and destruction of their multi-hundred-million-dollar real estate investment alongside the Lagos-Calabar Coastal Highway corridor in Okun-Ajah, Etiosa, Lagos. The demonstrators claim that over 2 years of delays, alleged procedural violations, repertorial attacks, and unresolved compensations have turned a national infrastructure project into a symbol of executive outreach and investor mistreatment. Organizers, including voices led by engineer Stella Ifeoma Okengwu, the U.S. citizen and CEO of Winhomes, and a diaspora returning herself. She insists the action is not against the highway protest itself, but against perceived impunity, the lack of due process, and the erosion of trust in Nigeria's investment climate. This event marks a dramatic escalation in a dispute that has simmered since 2014 to 2025, pitting ambitious federal infrastructure goals against private property rights, diaspora capital mobilization, and questions of transparency on all sides. Let's take a look at this video posted by engineer Stella Ifeoma on her Facebook page.
It has been 2 years. 2 years since engineer David Amahi destroyed Winhomes Estate. 2 years of pain. 2 years of injustice. We are Nigerians in the diaspora. We came home with hope. We came with investment. We came with belief in Nigeria. And engineer David Amahi destroyed it. Not because we were illegal, not because we lacked documentation, but because power was abused. We had everything: legal titles, verified documentation, government approvals. Yet, engineer David Amahi ignored all of it. We protested across the world. New York, London, Washington. We held press conferences. We cried out. But the system? It failed us. Then came the most shocking moment. A video. A confession. Engineer David Amahi, beating his chest, saying,
I mean, not minister, me order for it.
As engineer, yes. Okay.
This was not the president. This was engineer David Amahi, using his office, using his position as a tool of intimidation. And while we were seeking justice, he was attacking us, calling us fraudsters, land grabbers, liars, publicly discrediting us, threatening us, all documented, all deliberate. The target? Engineer Stella Ifeoma Okengwu, a woman who brought diaspora investors together, a builder, a leader. And when intimidation didn't work, engineer David Amahi introduced divide and rule, turning subscribers against each other, breaking unity, creating confusion. But listen carefully, this gets even worse. When we protested in Abuja, engineer David Amahi invited engineer Stella Okengwu for a meeting with diaspora investors. He opened the door. He initiated dialogue. We believed him. We trusted the process. But what happened next? Shock. Betrayal. Disgrace. Another video surfaced. Engineer David Amahi denying it, saying he never invited us. So we ask, what kind of Minister of Works says something today and denies it tomorrow?
And let me make it very clear that I never invited Winhomes for any negotiation. I never called them for any meeting. The matter is closed in court. The matter is with Survey General.
How can Nigeria attract investors when a sitting minister contradicts himself publicly? When agreements are denied? This is how foreign direct investment dies, not by war, not by policy, but by lack of trust. And today, we are done with silence. The Association of Nigerians in Diaspora has spoken. On April 20th, in Washington, D.C., a massive protest will take place. We will not be ignored. We will not be silenced. We will tell the world exactly what engineer David Amahi has done. Mr. President, this is your moment. You must investigate engineer David Amahi, hold him accountable, restore confidence in Nigeria, ensure compensation is paid. Because if this is ignored, then no diaspora investor, no Nigerian abroad, no foreign partner will ever trust Nigeria again. We came home with hope.
And now, to understand the full narrative, let's go back to the beginning. In the early years of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu administration, the Lagos-Calabar Coastal Highway emerged as one of the flagship projects of the renewed hope agenda. And it was championed aggressively by Senator David Umahi, the Minister of Works. The highway was envisioned as a transformative corridor that would link Lagos to the South-South region, and it would unlock economic potential, reduce travel time, boost trade, tourism, and regional integration, and also serve as a lasting legacy of bold infrastructure delivery in a country long plagued by deficits. And land acquisition and route planning were always going to be contentious in a densely developed coastal belt. So realignment became necessary as construction advanced. And with the ministry arguing that adjustments were made precisely to minimize the number of structures affected, and this is reportedly spanning over 300 buildings in surrounding communities through careful rerouting. Let's hear what the minister has to say.
For Lagos State. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen of the press. As part of my routine duty to go along the project, all our projects in Lagos State, and that's one of the reasons why we are here, and also to put some information on the social media in proper perspectives. I brought you to Chenage 13, kilometer 13 of the Lagos-Calabar Coastal Highway section 1. And then where we are, you can see my back, we have an estate called Ocean Bay. That's the name of the estate. And if you can view it from here, I'll be very glad. Let me start by saying that the marking of buildings, at the beginning, the marking of buildings that were done here, it wasn't done in isolation at all. It was done in conjunction with Lagos State government. And let me hasten to say that the Lagos State Ministry of Works and Infrastructure, the Lagos State Ministry of Physical Planning, the Lagos State Lands Bureau, the Surveyor General Office, NTDA, and all others were involved in the marking of structures on the right-of-way of the Lagos-Calabar Coastal Highway. We had not less than 4 representatives from each of these ministries I have mentioned, and in conjunction with Federal Ministry of Works. So we started from Chene 0, and when we got to this Chene 13, we encountered a cluster of more than 200 buildings to be demolished. More than 200 buildings were encountered at my back here. And then it took the intervention of His Excellency, the Federal Minister of Works. He was here 2 times for this purpose to come and carry out inspection. And eventually it was decided that the road be realigned to where we are standing now. You can see where we are standing is very close to the ocean. This is less than 50 meters to the ocean, less than 30 meters to the ocean. And this land here, it belongs to the federal government. So we left that alignment to come to a place that belongs to the federal government. And for you to know, the Supreme Court had ruled before now that lands that are 250 meters away from the ocean all lands belong to federal government. And that's the reason why that realignment took place, and we are here. Let me just close by saying that what we have done is not against what the Constitution of Nigeria. We have obeyed the Constitution. We moved the alignment to our land so as to prevent over 300 buildings from being demolished. I don't know whether you have any question for me here.
Yeah, Comptroller, I want to believe that somebody must have owned this land that you are realigned to. Do you have any meeting with the person or the company or the compensation, or what do you have?
Okay, so what we had here, there were chanties, hoodlums that were making use of this place. All this stretch full of chanties. And so when His Excellency came here, he decided that the road must be realigned to this place so that in order to prevent over 300 buildings from being demolished.
So are we still going to have a briefing at Winhomes Estate? Because I have a question.
Please ask your question here.
Okay, sir. There's this claim that you in particular asked the Winhomes woman, Stella, to go and bribe the minister 20 million naira. Is that true? Those are social media
talk. Camera. They are social media talk. They are social media talk. And I'll put it back to you, gentlemen of the press, that this is the estate. They have resident association. They have resident association here with leaders in that community as well. You can carry out your investigative journalism. I thought you guys are journalists. Please, this is the estate. I've brought you to the estate. Go there, find out from them. Nothing like that happened. And I challenge whoever is saying that 200 million exchange, that it's a pure lie. It takes 2 to tango. There must be a giver and there must be a receiver. Is that correct? So please go in there. I'm asking you to do your work. I don't need to go with you. I brought you.
Meanwhile, in Okun-Ajah, Winhomes Global Services Limited, under the CEO, she has positioned its estate as a beacon for diaspora investment. The project was marked as a premium residential development that had successfully mobilized approximately $250 million from Nigerian investors living abroad, along with some foreign nationals. And many of these investors reportedly committed life savings, their retirement funds, and hard-earned remittances. These are the monies earned in the UK, the US, Canada, and somewhere else, hoping to secure appreciating assets back home and to contribute to national development. And the physical development on this site reportedly included a gatehouse structure, plot demarcations, and sales to individual subscribers. Stella had consequently maintained that the estate enjoyed proper approval from relevant state and local authorities, and that significant capital has been injected. She publicly challenged critics, including the minister, to verify the funding sources, while at times questioning the minister's own wealth and properties in return. Let's take a look at this video.
Engineer David Umahi, you called me a fraud. You questioned how I brought $250 million as an investor. You mocked my credibility. But let me ask you something that Nigerians and the world are already asking quietly. As a former governor of Ebonyi State, how did you build the massive hotel that you named after your child and property associated with you across Enugu, Lekki, and Ebonyi and beyond. How does a public servant, a governor, salary amass such project that runs into billions of dollars? When you look at your own life, your own assets, your footprint in power, do you really feel comfortable pointing finger at a woman who built her wealth transparently, legally, and internationally? You questioned how investors trusted me with $250 million because people trust character. That is the answer. Because people trust structure. Because people trust transparency. Because people trust who?
Unfortunately for her, the bulldozers arrived, and portions of the Winhomes land were impacted as the highway alignment cut through or divided into the area. And the company and affected investors alleged inadequate prior notice in some instances, and demolition amid subsequent court processes, the failure to follow due process under the Land Use Act and other laws, and a lack of prompt, fair compensation despite repeated engagement. They described the action as an intentional diversion that could have been avoided, causing massive financial loss, emotional trauma, and reputational damage to the diaspora participants who had answered the patriotic call to invest at home. Then legal battles ensued, as Winhomes secured an interim injunction from a Lagos High Court restraining further trespass on parts of the land. However, a federal high court later struck out a related suit filed by Okun-Ajah, citing issues such as lack of reasonable course of action, jurisdictional questions, and claims that she had previously divested or sold portions of the land to individual buyers, thereby potentially lacking standing in certain claims. The ministry and its supporters highlighted that only a gatehouse was visibly developed on the affected portion, and they emphasized that compensation processes had been initiated for verifiable claims. And throughout 2025, these disputes played out in the media, with the minister issuing public ultimatum for documentary proof of the 250 million naira investment, questioning the scale of actual development on the ground, and warning that misinformation could harm the Tinubu administration's relationship with the diaspora. And Stella and supporters have countered that accusations of outreach with selective narratives and dragging the presidency into what should have been a reasonable technical and compensation matter. Petitions flowed into the presidency, and stakeholders' engagements were held, but full closure remained elusive. By mid-April 2026, the matter had dragged on for 24 months, with civil society groups stepping in forcefully. The Community of Youth and Mobilization and Sensitization, that's the CYMS, in a communique signed by Director General Chief Obinna Nwaka and Honorable Tayo Otola Agbaje, the chairman of Renewed Hope Concerned Citizens, they urged President Bola Ahmed Tinubu to personally intervene. They called for clarification on the authorization of the demolition, the verification that due process was followed, and guaranteed fair and prompt compensation. The group warned that prolonged uncertainty threatens Nigeria's image as an investment-friendly nation and explicitly appealed to diaspora stakeholders to suspend a planned April 20 protest in Washington, D.C. in favor of a domestic presidential-led resolution. And similarly, the Human Rights Writers Association of Nigeria, the HURIYWA, they described the situation as a prolonged injustice, declaring that the delay in compensation and its potential to erode investors' confidence, and they joined the call for president's intervention, an independent review, and transparent handling to protect both national and developmental goals and private rights. But despite these appeals, the Diaspora Coalition, they proceeded with today's DC event, framing it as a necessary step to internationalize the pain of 2 years of injustice, and they demand accountability at the highest level. This is not just a simple government versus victim story. It is a complex coalition of competing national priorities, governance weaknesses, human elements, and economic realities that reveal deep structural issues in Nigeria's developmental model. The Coastal Highway is undeniably visionary, as Nigeria desperately needs such transformative projects to close infrastructure gaps that have hindered growth for decades. Routine adjustments are standard globally when realities on the ground, which is the existing developments, when they differ from initial plans. And the ministry claims that Realignment actually minimized border demolition in credible principle. However, when titled private lands, especially one marked to diaspora investors, is affected, the test of good governance becomes whether acquisition follows transparent valuation, if it follows prompt compensation, and minimal disruption. Critics have argued that executive speed sometimes override judicial and statutory safeguards, sending a chill signal. Your investment is welcome until it stands in the way of priority projects. And this risks, and Nigeria actively cuts diaspora remittances and investments, which runs into tens of billions annually. Policies celebrate returnees and foreign exchange inflows, yet when disputes arise like this, the handling can inadvertently portray diaspora capital as secondary or easily expendable. Many Winhomes subscribers are ordinary professionals abroad who trusted the system enough to bring money home, and their sense of betrayal watching the physical assets raised while navigating bureaucracy goes beyond finances to questions of national loyalty and belonging. And if this goes on unresolved, this could dampen future real estate and direct investments far more than any single project delay. And some land buyers have publicly pushed back against Stella's central ownership claims, asserting that Winhomes has already sold significant plots. One buyer claimed 70 plots for 1.7 billion, and thus the company may no longer hold full title or standing to represent all affected parties. Let's take a look.
All we are saying, we have taken possession of our land. Winhomes. All we are saying, we are taking possession of our land.
On each plot. So if you have 10 plots here, that means you're going to pay 125 million naira to her. Some of us here ran around and some argued like, we bought this land since 2021. We have not taken possession. How come you are asking us to pay a development levy? We have not seen any road construction, any gutter construction, no electricity, no water. And you are asking for fee. I said, okay, fine. I have my evidence. I paid 50 million to her. As part of it, allocate my land to me. She received the money and she said, okay. She allocated the 13 plots of land I bought for her, all records, receipts, survey, deed, all are with me. She allocated 13 plots of land to me. And to my greatest surprise, I came to this very land. And that same 13 plots of land, look at the land that was fenced over there. And that is the land you're seeing. Someone else has fenced the land. And I called on her, madam, who fenced this very land? She said she was the one that fenced it. I said, why did you fence the very land you gave to me? Her response was, she wanted to try if that falls within the 150 meters the federal government gave as a setback. I said,
all of this raises uncomfortable questions. How was the 25 million figure aggravated or verified? Was the project primarily advanced stage development or more of a land banking or sales model with limited physical progress, as the ministry has emphasized that the presence of a mainly gatehouse? Forensic clarity on actual sunk costs, subscriber disruptions, the approval chain, and who truly owns what portion is essential for equitable compensation, but media wars have often reduced this to binary shouting matches. The coexistence of state or local approvals for the estate alongside later federal highway alignment, it exposes weak intergovernment coordination mechanisms. Land realignment in Nigeria remains fragmented. It is prone to overlapping claims and last-minute conflicts. This is not unique to this case, but it's just symptomatic. Stronger upfront interministerial, the federal state alignment protocols for mega projects could prevent such escalations. Additionally, let's look at the human and emotional toll. Families abroad monitoring bulldozers via videos, the years of legal ping pong, it just highlights how bureaucratic delays compound financial loss into psychological and trust erosion. The Winhomes saga is ultimately a microscope of Nigeria's larger struggle, which is how to deliver bold, legacy-defining infrastructure in a complex democracy without trampling the very right of the citizens and capital to seek more power. One future path prioritizes unhindered state-driven development, accepting some collateral damage as a price of progress. And another is that its sustainable growth demands robust rule of law, with transparent processes, fair compensation mechanisms, and just genuine partnership, especially with those bringing scarce foreign exchange. Today's protest in Washington would amplify the second narrative of the international stage, potentially inviting scrutiny from global investors, the diaspora communities, and even foreign governments. Yet, endless domestic delay, it risks undermining the first by breeding criticism and slowly project momentum. And this escalation, it serves no one long term because with presidential intervention, perhaps through an independent, time-bound valuation and compensation panel, with full public disclosure of planning decisions and payments made, and a policy for future projects, this could de-escalate, it could restore trust, and set a positive precedent. It would just affirm that Nigerian values both transformative roads and the people who invest in building alongside them. And until such decisive action, the bulldozer may have cleared land for Asifat, and the deeper damage to confidence and narratives, it will just linger for longer than any constructive timeline. This situation remains very fluid. We're going to keep watching closely for any immediate response from the presidency or further court developments or just outcomes from today's DC event. As true resolution will require moving beyond acquisitions to verifiable facts, the fair remedies, and systemic learning so that future diaspora dreams do not end in the same dust. Waivers, what do you think about this story? As the Nigerian government, through the Minister of Works, handled this case with all urgency? Or can Winhomes Homes be fully blamed for this event? Let's head on to our next story. As the world watches Africa growing in a global affairs, three significant developments unfolding around April 20, 2026 illustrate how the continent is steadily positioning itself as a more equal partner in international trade, in innovation and resource strategies. These stories reflect both new opportunities from major powers and the practical challenges Africa must navigate to turn partnerships into lasting prosperity for its people. Let's start with the first story, which centers on the upcoming African Forward Summit. The African-France Partnerships for Innovation and Growth, scheduled for May 11 and 12, 2026 in Nairobi, Kenya. Kenya and France are jointly hosting this event with President William Ruto and Emmanuel Macron co-chairing. It would bring together African heads of state and government with business leaders, investors, youth representatives, civil society, and diaspora voices. And this marks the first time such a high-level France-African summit is held in an English-speaking African country, signaling a deliberate shift away from France's traditional focus on its Francophone partners. The summit aims to move beyond historical colonial narratives and old aid-based relationships towards a forward-looking model centered on real economic complementaries, innovations, and mutual growth. And key discussions area would include digital technology, the sustainable agriculture and food security, healthcare and resilience, energy transition, the blue economy, climate action, and reforms in the international financial architecture. And side events would feature a business forum to encourage private sector deals, and the summit would conclude with a cultural celebration highlighting Africans' creativity and Nairobi's role as a dynamic hub. Initiatives like the Farm Innov project, which has supported Kenyan agri-food companies through French expertise, it shows the kind of practical cooperation already happening on the ground. And the Kenyan diaspora has taken a keen interest in this development as many diaspora members, they see this summit as a chance for Kenya and broader African professionals in tech, in the creative industries, entrepreneurship, and innovation to build meaningful connections with French partners. They hope that it would lead to skill transfers, joint ventures, and investment opportunities that will benefit people back home. At the same time, the diaspora voices, they still experience cautious optimism. They welcome the change in tone, but they question whether the summit will produce concrete, measurable outcomes or just simply repeat high-level declarations from past gatherings. For the diaspora, inclusion must go beyond invitation to actual participation in follow-up implementation if the partnership is to feel genuine and impactful. Now, this reset, it comes at a time when France is adapting to a more multipolar world where African countries have greater choices among partners. And by choosing Nairobi as the venue and emphasizing innovation over traditional donor-recipient dynamics, France is trying to rebuild trust and relevance, especially after a strain in parts of West and Central Africa. So this approach could open doors for French companies in areas where they have expertise, while helping African nations accelerate their development priorities. However, true equality would require addressing barriers such as market access for African exports to Europe, support for debate sustainability, and technology transfer without restrictive conditions. Some critics have noted that without strong monitoring mechanisms, without strong timelines and accountability for commitment, the summit risks becoming another diplomatic event with limited on-the-ground transformation. And for ordinary Africans and the diaspora, the real test would be whether discussions or innovations, if it translates into jobs, the local capacity building, and reduced dependency rather than benefiting only a small elite of foreign firms. And still building on this theme of Africa engaging major powers on its own term, a second major development is happening today in Beijing. African ambassadors stationed in China are gathering for preparatory coordination ahead of their annual retreat, which runs on April 23rd and April 24 in 2026. The central focus of the retreat is how to best leverage China's new policy that grants 100% tariff-free access to the Chinese market for goods originating from 53 African countries starting May 1, 2026. This policy represents a major expansion of earlier preferences that mainly benefited Africa's least developed countries. So from next month, virtually all tariff lines, including agricultural products, processed foods, light manufacturers, textiles, and other goods, they will enter China duty-free with no quotas attached. The announcement builds on growing trade ties with China and Africa, already reaching record highs. And the African Union Permanent Mission in China, along with representatives from the AU Commission Economic Department, AUDA-NEPAD, and the AFCFTA Secretariat, they are participating. A keynote address will come from Dr. Nados Bekele Thomas, the CEO of AUDA-NEPAD, and the Chinese officials from relevant ministries, they will also join. The ambassadors' discussions are highly practical. They are working on strategies to strengthen coordinated African approaches, to improve export readiness, to meet Chinese quality and standard requirements, and enhance logistics and certification systems. Also to align the new access with the African Continental Free Trade Area and the Agenda 2063 priorities. The goal is to move beyond simply celebrating the opening and instead create real pathways for increased export, the local value addition, job creation, and broader economic prosperity across the continent. This tariff-free offer shows Chinese strategy thinking in a world of rising protectionism elsewhere. And by unilaterally opening its massive consumer markets, Beijing State strengthens political and economic relationships, which secures long-term access to African resources and their support. And this presents itself as a consistent partner. And for Africa, this opportunity is very clear. The potential to boost exports, to encourage processing of raw materials at home, and to diversify away from over-reliance on traditional markets. Yet, this success would hinge on addressing supply-side constraints that many countries still face, such as scaling up consistent production, building reliable cold chains for perishables, aligning with stringent sanitary and quality standards, and understanding that the preferences of Chinese buyers may differ. So without urgent investment in these areas and stronger regional value chains under the AFCFTA, the benefits could flow disproportionately to a few stronger African economies, leaving smaller or less prepared nations with limited gains and possibly widening internal continental disparities. So some have pointed out that while this policy is quite generous and it comes without demand for immediate reciprocity, it could still fit into similar patterns if Africa primarily supplies inputs while higher value processes and manufacturing remains concentrated in China. So to avoid this, African governments, the private sector, and continental institutions, they must act decisively by negotiating complementary investment agreements, by investing in skills and infrastructure, and using the tariff window to drive genuine industrialization rather than just increasing volumes of raw or minimal processed exports. The Beijing retreat is an important step in that direction, emphasizing unity and strategic foresight among African diplomats. And while all of this is going on, at the same time in South Africa, a different but related dimension of global competition is advancing through the Phalaborwa Rare Earths project in Limpopo province. The United States is providing significant backing via a $50 million equity investment commitment from the U.S. International Development Finance Corporation, which is channeled through its partner TechMet. This project is developed by Rainbow Rare Earths, and it focuses on extracting critical rare earth elements, including neodymium, praseodymium, dysprosium, and terbium, from large piles of sulfoxime waste, from the waste left over from decades of sulfate mining and chemical processing. These materials are essential for building high-performance magnets used in electric vehicles, the wind turbines, the robotics, defense systems, electronics, and broader clean energy transition. The approach stands out because it reprocesses existing industrial waste rather than developing a new traditional mine, potentially offering a lower environmental footprint while utilizing South Africa's established mining infrastructure. The project is estimated to require around $317 million in funding, with the first production targeted around 2028 and an operational lifespan of approximately 16 years. The U.S. investment is expected to be disbursed once construction of the processing facility begins in early 2027. This initiative forms part of the broader U.S. strategies to diversify and secure supply chains for critical minerals away from heavy reliance on China, which dominates global rare earth mining and especially the refining and processing stages. So Washington views reliable access to these materials as vital for economic competitiveness and national security. The project continues to move forward despite occasional diplomatic differences between the United States and South Africa, underscoring how strategic resource needs often take precedence in international relations. So, on one hand, this project could generate jobs in a region with deep mining experience. It could bring technology and skill transfer, and it could also strengthen South Africa's position as a key supplier in the global green economy, as the country already produces significant shares of platinum, gold, metals, and other strategic minerals. So processing waste, it also allows for a narrative of sustainability and circular economic principle. But on the other hand, a less commonly discussed angle would be that even when extraction or initial processing occurs in Africa, the more valuable downstream stages, such as full refining into metals or manufacturing of finished magnets, it would frequently remain outside the continent. Without strong local content requirements, without the technology sharing agreement, and the deliberate efforts to build regional industrial capacity, such projects they risk supplying global chains without creating the kind of transformative, high-value industry that could drive broader development and reduce long-term dependency. So South Africa's balancing act, it adds further complexity. As a member of BRICS with substantial existing and economic ties to China, Pretoria is engaging multiple powers simultaneously to maximize leverage and investment options. This hedging can strengthen negotiating power, but it also requires careful management to avoid internal division of perception of playing partners against each other. An environmental oversight for reprocessing legacy waste must remain rigorous in order to protect local communities and to be transparent in regards to revenue management, because this would ensure benefits reach beyond a narrow group of stakeholders. And some have observed that while great power interest in African critical minerals, it brings welcome capital and attention, it can also turn the continent into an arena for external rivalries, as both the Chinese tariff-free model and the US mineral financing approach, they deliver resources and opportunities, yet neither has consistently delivered full-scale industrialization or widespread properties on its own. So for Africa to truly benefit, the government needs to insist on value addition at home. They need to coordinate across borders through mechanisms like AFCFTA and to ensure that partnerships include clear provisions for skill development, the local ownership stakes, and environmental and social safeguards. And when we view all of these developments together, the upcoming Nairobi summit with France, the Beijing ambassador retreat on China's tariff-free offer, and the US-backed rare earth project in South Africa. These three all tell a connected story of Africa's evolving place in the world. External powers are actively adjusting their approaches. We have France coming towards innovation and broader engagement, China through expanded market access, and the United States through targeted strategic investment in critical resources. This all reflects recognition of African demographic strengths, the expanding market, and vital reserves of materials needed for the global green and digital transitions. And at the same time, the stories all highlight that Africa's gradual rise as an equal player, it depends not only on attractive offers from abroad, but also internal readiness and strategic actions. So whether through innovation partnerships, through the export growth, or resource projects, sources will require stronger coordination among African countries, investment in production capacity and skills, the insistence on genuine value addition, and transparent governance and meaningful inclusion of the youth, the women, and diaspora community, also the private sector. Without these elements, new partnerships risk repeating old imbalances in updated forms. And as preparations intensify for the Nairobi summit in less than a month, as African diplomats refine strategies in Beijing, and as work advances on the Palabora project, the coming period will offer important tests. If these initiatives deliver measurable progress, more jobs, more technology gains, diversified and higher value exports, and reduced dependency, they could mark a meaningful step towards inclusive and sustainable growth. Africa is increasingly in a position to help shape the theme of its global engagement. How effective it connects these different opportunities, how it learns from each of them, and how it maintains a clear focus on continental priorities, it would only determine whether this moment becomes a turning point for broad-based prosperity, or if it remains a series of promising but uneven advances. The direction is definitely encouraging, but the hard work of implementation, it lies ahead. Waivers, what do you think of these three developing stories? Are you directly affected or in part of these countries? Drop your thoughts in the comment section. And to our third story for today, two major cities are dominating conversations in the Nigerian aviation industry as of April 20, 2026. And they both point to the same outworn outcome: increasing unreliability, the higher risk for passengers, financial strain on operators, and potential widespread disruption to air travel across the country. The first major crisis involves a sharp rise in bird strike incidents, especially affecting United Nigerian Airlines, which has raised serious questions about airport safety and wildlife management. The second is the threat by Nigerian Airlines to suspend all domestic flight operations starting today due to an explosive surge in jet fuel prices. And although one appears to be a safety and infrastructure issue while the other is purely economic, they share the same underlying consequences: eroding confidence in Nigeria's aviation sector and threatening the connectivity that businesses, travelers, and the diaspora depend on. Let's begin with the bird strike crisis that has been making headlines in recent weeks. The United Nigerian Airlines has reported multiple bird strike incidents since 2026, with the situation becoming particularly alarming in mid-April. The airline confirmed its fifth bird strike of the year when a CRJ-900 aircraft was hit by a bird while landing in Abuja on a flight from Kano. And shortly after, the carrier experienced additional strikes, including cases that grounded aircraft within short period of times. Sometimes 2 or 3 planes affected in just 48 hours, and in one stretch, the airline grounded 3 aircrafts due to damage from these incidents, leading to flight cancellations, delays, and significant operational disruptions across its network, which includes routes from Abuja, Kano, Benin City, and other major cities. Let's take a look at the press release from the United Nigerian Airlines Company. For immediate press release, travel advisory: bird strike on our operating CRJ-900 aircraft, dated 14/04/2026. United Nigerian Airlines wishes to inform our valued passengers and the general public of a bird strike involving one of our operating CRJ-900 aircraft during the landing of flight UN 0579 from Malam Aminu Kano International Airport, Kano to Nnamdi Azikiwe International Airport, Abuja, scheduled for 18:15 hours on Tuesday, 14th April 2026. In line with our strict and uncompromising safety standards, the aircraft has immediately been withdrawn from operations to undergo comprehensive technical inspections and any required maintenance before being returned to service. And consequently, some flights across our network may not operate as scheduled. However, safety remains our highest priority. We sincerely apologize for any inconvenience these unforeseen developments may cause to our passengers' travel plans. While this marks the 5th bird strike involving our aircraft since January 2026, each occurrence has been managed in full compliance with applicable aviation safety regulations and established operational procedures. We appreciate the understanding of our valued passengers and reaffirm our commitment to maintaining the highest standards of safety and operational reliability. We will continue to take all necessary measures to optimize our operations and exceed the expectations of our passengers. Signed, Public Relations Office, United Nigerian Airlines. So the airline has been transparent about the problems, publicly urging the Federal Airport Authority of Nigeria, FAAN, to strengthen wildlife hazard management at airports. And this would include better habitat control around runways, the use of bird dispersal techniques, radar monitoring, and regular clearing of vegetation or waste that attracts birds. Passengers have, expressed concerns about safety during the critical phases of takeoff and landing, while aviation experts and commentators, they've highlighted how repeated incidents can damage engines, the nose cones, or other compartments, requiring time-consuming inspections and repairs before the airline can return to service. To understand how we got here, it helps look back a few years. Bird strikes have also management. To understand how we got here, it helps to look back a few years. Bed strikes have always been a recognized risk in global aviation, but in Nigeria, they have become more frequent as air traffic volumes increased after the sector's partial recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic and economic challenges. With urban expansion and poor waste management near some airports, it has turned runways and approach paths into unintended feeding grounds for these birds. And in the past, airlines have treated occasional strikes as unfortunate but manageable operational hazards. However, the concentration of incidents on one carrier in 2026, with reports of 5, 6, or even 7 cases since January, has shifted the conversation from isolated events to a systematic safety and maintenance concern. Each grounding not only costs the airlines revenue, but it also strands passengers, it disrupts schedules, and it adds pressure on already stretched maintenance teams. The bird strikes are not simply a nature problem, but they are a symptom of broader environmental and governance shortcomings around Nigerian airports. Many facilities are located near farmlands. They are located near open dump sites or wetlands that naturally draw large flocks of birds, especially during certain seasons. And some of the effective long-term solutions could be comprehensive wildlife hazard assessment, international standard fencing, the sonic dispersal systems, and even partnerships with environmental agencies. All of this required sustained investment and coordination between the FAA and the Nigerian Civil Aviation Authority, the airlines, and local communities. Yet, these measures, they often take a back seat to more visible projects like terminal renovations or runway extensions. And another angle would be the human impact. Pilots, they have to remain extra vigilant during high-risk phases. The cabin crew, they deal with anxious passengers, and engineers work under time pressure to certify the aircraft is safe again. For smaller and newer airlines, repeated disruptions can be financially devastating, potentially accelerating industry consolidation where only the strongest carriers survive. And some have pointed fingers in different directions, arguing that airlines should invest more in their own bird strike prevention training and robust maintenance protocols, while others place the main responsibility on airport authorities, saying FAN has been too reactive rather than proactive in implementing modern wildlife management practices, which has proven effective at comparable airports in Africa and beyond. A balanced view recognizes that while global oil prices and weather patterns can play a role, the frequencies seen in 2026 suggests domestic factors. The poor perimeter control, the inadequate waste management near airports, and the slow adoption of technology are amplifying the risk. And if this is left unaddressed, the issue could lead to higher insurance costs, with stricter regulatory oversight, the reputational damage for Nigerian aviation, and even reduced willingness among international partners to code share or invest in the sector. And the second trending crisis is equally pressing and directed to economics. The Airline Operators of Nigeria, AON, representing around a dozen mostly domestic carriers, they have issued a formal warning that its members may suspend all domestic flight operations effective today, April 20, 2026, unless urgent steps are taken to reverse the dramatic rise in jet fuel prices. In a strongly worded letter sent to few marketers and copied to senior government officials during including President Bola Ahmed and the Minister of Aviation, the AON described the increase as astronomical, artificial, and unsustainable. Jet A1 fuel prices have reportedly jumped from about 900 per litre at the end of February 2026 to as high as 3,000 to 3,300 naira per litre in recent weeks, a surge of over 270% to 300% in roughly 6 weeks, far outpacing movement in global crude oil prices. And airlines argued that fuel now consumes such a huge portion of their operating costs that even full flights cannot generate enough revenue to cover expenses. So raising ticket prices to match the new cost would drive away passengers in an already price-sensitive market, while continuing to fly at a loss is no longer viable for many operators. One airline has reportedly already grounded its entire fleet since mid-March due to these pressures, and the aviation minister has appealed to the carriers to exercise restraint and avoid any suspension or sharp fare increases that could cause wider economic harm, but operators insist the situation has reached a breaking point. And looking back, Nigerian aviation has faced recurring fuel cost challenges for years. The sector has long been vulnerable to foreign exchange shortages, the naira volatility, and inconsistent local refining outputs, even with the facilities like Dangote Refinery now operational. And past subsidy removals and global oil prices, its swings created similar headaches, but the speed and scale of the current spike, which airlines attribute partly to pricing practices by marketers rather than pure market forces, has pushed many carriers to the edge. And in previous episodes, airlines responded by cutting less profitable routes, delaying fleet expansions, or modestly adjusting fares. This time, the threat of a full domestic shutdown, it signals that those coping mechanisms have been exhausted. These two crises, the bed strikes and fuel prices, they are interconnected symptoms of the same structural weaknesses in Nigerian aviation ecosystem. Safety incidents like bird strikes increase operational costs through grounding and repairs, making airlines even more sensitive to any rise in variable expenses such as fuel. At the same time, severe financial pressures from the fuel costs, it limits carriers' ability to invest in better aircraft maintenance, to pilot training for hazard avoidance, or just collaborative programs with airports to improve wildlife control. The shared consequences is very clear. Reduced schedule reliability, higher risk for passengers, potential job losses among pilots, cabin crew, and ground staff, and also the disruption to critical economic activities that rely on air travel, from the oil and gas operations and agricultural logistics to emergency medical evacuations and small business connectivity across Nigeria's vast territory. Domestic aviation is not just about moving people from Lagos to Abuja or Kano. It supports business travels. It supports cargo movement, tourism, and the diaspora ability to maintain family ties and economic remittances through frequent, affordable flights. A prolonged disruption from either safety grounds or a fuel-induced shutdown would hit banks that finance the sector, and it would increase insecurity in remote areas by limiting rapid responses and damage Nigeria's attractiveness as an investment destination. Smaller airlines would likely suffer the most, risking further consolidation that could reduce competition, and it would leave travelers with fewer options and higher prices in the long run. All of these are valid observations, and some are blaming airlines for inadequate financing hedging against fuel volatility or just for expanding fleets faster than the supporting infrastructure could handle. While others would say fuel marketers or possible profiting and questions why local refinery capacity has not translated into more stable and affordable aviation fuel supply. The government regulators, they face criticism for slow responses, policy responses, and the insufficient oversight of both airport safety standards and the fuel pricing transparency. But if look at the global factors that plays part, not just the domestic issues, the naira instability, the disruption inefficiencies, the fragmented coordination between agencies, and underinvestment in foundational infrastructure, they are all magnifying the pain far beyond what many peer countries experience. And when you connect these two stories together, a clear and more sobering narrative emerges. Nigeria's aviation sector is operating in a fragile state where safety and economic pressures reinforce each other in a vicious circle. The frequent bed strikes, it erodes operational efficiency and public trust, while unsustainable fuel costs, it threatens the very viability of flying. And together, they undermine the sector's ability to support national developmental goals at a time where reliable air connectivity is more important than ever for economic integration, for for job creation and international engagement. And making sense of all of these challenges, it moves beyond blame to coordinated, practical solutions. For the bird strikes, FAN, NCAA, and airlines, they should jointly develop and implement modern wildlife hazard management plans with clear timelines, with technology adoptions, and performance metrics. For fuel price, there is an urgent need for transparent pricing mechanisms, assured supply from local refineries at competitive rates, the short-term stabilization measures, and longer-term policies that treat aviation fuel as strategic infrastructure rather than just purely commercial commodity. A deeper systematic reform would involve stronger public-private partnerships to better regulatory enforcement and treating aviation not just as an afterthought but as an essential national infrastructure. These twin crises, they serve as a loud wake-up call. Nigeria has ambitious visions for aviation expansion, new terminals, the fleet modernization, and increased connectivity, but these plans will remain on paper if the basis of safety, reliability, and cost predictability, they are not fixed first. The traveling public, the businesses, the diaspora communities, and the wider economy, they just deserve safer skies and more dependable, affordable flights. If stakeholders use the current spotlight and pressures to drive genuine reforms with accountability, with investment and collaborations, the sector could emerge more resilient. And if the responses remain fragmented or delayed, the same consequences of disruptions, the loss of trust, and economic drag will continue to reoccur, holding Nigeria back in one of the most strategic industries. As of today, the situation remains highly fluid as the airlines threaten to suspend operations is still very active, and concerns over bird strikes continue to generate discussions. How regulators, the airport authorities, the fuel suppliers, and the operators, how they respond in the coming hours and the coming days, it will determine whether these trending issues become catalysts for meaningful improvement or just another chapter in a circle of avoidable setbacks. Nigeria's aviation future, it depends on turning today's challenges into tomorrow's strength through decisive and unified actions. Waivers. Has this story affected you directly or affected someone you know directly? Drop in the comment section. Has any of your flights been cancelled? Have you experienced firsthand, this bird fight? And to our next story, in the bustling world of African technology and business, one African-founded fintech company is quietly making waves that speak to the growing strength and maturity of the continent's digital economy. Okun-Ajah Africa Limited has recently achieved a notable milestone by securing further credit rating upgrades while simultaneously launching on innovative new features that allow businesses to receive payments through WhatsApp conversations. This development, reportedly wild in recent days, it is being seen as significant breakthrough for the fintech sector, especially as many startups across Africa continue to face funding difficulties. They continue to face regulatory complexities and the challenges of scaling practical solutions for everyday businesses. Okun-Ajah operates a licensed payment solution provider and international money transfer operator, focusing on building reliable infrastructure for businesses rather than flashy consumer apps. And it currently supports companies in more than 20 African markets with services such as instant payouts, the global collections, short-term financing options, and secure checkout tools for merchants. The latest achievements combine strong financial discipline with user-friendly innovation, positioning the company as one that is not just surviving in a tough environment, but steadily building the kind of robust foundation that can support wider continental growth. And to fully appreciate what is happening now, it helps to look back at how Okun-Ajah evolved. The company was incorporated in Nigeria in March 2022 with a clear focus on solving real infrastructure gaps in payments. And in its early days, like many African fintechs, it dealt with currency volatility, the need for proper licensing, and intense competition from both local and international players. But what set Payaza apart was its deliberate choice to pursue direct connections with global card networks like Visa and MasterCard, making it one of the few processors headquarters in sub-Saharan Africa to achieve such certifications. This infrastructure-first strategy helps the company to avoid heavy reliance on third-party aggregators, giving it better choices over operations and improved margins from the start. And by 2024 and 2025, Payaza began scaling more aggressively. It raised funds through a 50 billion naira commercial paper program, issued multiple tranches, and demonstrated strong repayment discipline by clearing significant amounts early, including over 32 billion naira repaid on schedule in some reports. With credit ratings agencies, they started paying attention very closely. Indices like the Global Credit Ratings, the GRC, a Moody affiliate, the Data Pro, and Augusto and Co., who issued and then upgraded ratings, moving the company into solid investment grade territory. These upgrades reflected improved liquidity, the consistent performance under its debt programs, and overall financial strength at a time when many fintechs were struggling with valuation reset and investor caution. And fast forward to April 2026, Payaza has delivered two fresh pieces of good news in quick successions. First, it received additional credit rating upgrades, including moves that further strengthened its investment grade status across multiple agencies. And these upgrades are not just symbolic, they make it easier and cheaper for the company to access capital from banks and institutional investors, while building greater trust with partners across Africa and beyond. Second, and perhaps more visibly exciting for everyday businesses, Payaza officially launched its Chat and Pay feature. This tool turns WhatsApp, the already go-to communication platform for millions of African merchants and customers, into a payment plan. And here's how it works in practice. A business gets a dedicated WhatsApp number. Customers can browse products, they can ask questions, they can complete purchases all within the same chat. And an automated intelligent checkout flow guides the process. The customer initiates the transaction, receives a secure prompt or link, completes payment, and gets instant verification and a receipt. No need to switch to bank app, no need to copy long account numbers or just start chasing manual confirmations. Payments are verified in real time, which improves cash flows for businesses and it reduces the stress of follow-ups and disputes. And this launch is particularly smart because WhatsApp has massive reach across Africa, especially among small and medium enterprises that use it as their primary storefront. So many of these businesses already conduct sales conversion on the app, but they face friction when it comes to actually collecting money. Chat and Pay aims to remove that friction, making transactions faster, safer, and more seamless while staying inside the two people already trust and use daily. And on a positive side, this combination of upgraded credit ratings and embedded finance innovation, it shows a maturing African fintech sector that is moving away from hype-driven customer apps towards a practical B2B infrastructure that solves real pain points. By focusing on direct global certifications and conventional commerce, Payaza is helping SMEs, which form the backbone of most African economies, to get paid faster and operate more efficiently. And if this is widely adopted, features like Chat and Pay could meaningfully boost financial inclusion for informal and semi-formal businesses that have long struggled with fragmented payment options. However, while WhatsApp integration, it sounds seamless, its real impact will depend on factors like reliable internet access, affordable data costs, and varying levels of digital comfort among users, especially in smaller towns or rural areas. In places where connectivity is quite patchy or data remains very expensive, this feature might primarily benefit more urban or technology-savvy merchants, potentially leaving behind the smallest businesses it aims to help and eventually widen the digital divide gap rather than closing it. And the credit rating upgrades are very impressive, and they reflect genuine financial discipline, particularly after successful debt repayments. Yet, rapid scaling combined with resilience on debt instruments, it carries risk in volatile African markets. If macroeconomic conditions tighten further with currency fluctuations, with inflation, or liquidity challenges, even well-rated companies could face pressures. So through long-term success, it would require balancing both innovation with even stricter risk management and diversification across markets. And some might point out that while pay-as-a direct infrastructure approach gives stronger control and margins, it increases the burden of navigating different regulatory environments, data protection rules, and anti-fraud measures as it expands across more countries. African fintechs have seen cycles of excitement followed by corrections. For pay-as-a to set a lasting standard, it would need to show not just the technical features and ratings, but measurable outcomes, such as higher transaction success rates for undeserved businesses, tangible job creations in the ecosystem, or meaningful deductions in payments friction costs. So, pay-as-a deserves genuine credit for its disciplined execution. In an era where many global investors remain selective about African tech, achieving multiple investment-grade ratings and launching practical tools that leverage popular platforms like WhatsApp, it demonstrates both financial credibility and market understanding. The company is providing that homegrown African fintechs that they can build sustainable models without simply copying strategies from somewhere else. And when you connect all of these developments to the bigger picture, they form part of a hopeful but realistic narrative about Africa's digital economy in 2026. The continent has already seen mobile money and digital payments cross impressive volume thresholds, driving inclusion and supporting small businesses. Yet, there are some persistent challenges that would remain, like the high costs, the fragmented systems, the infrastructure gaps, and even uneven access. So companies like pay-as-a are helping address these by creating more reliable, localized solutions that combine global standards with African realities. This breakthrough it also reflects a subtle but important shift. The most impactful fintech progress may increasingly come from strong B2B infrastructure and embedded tools that quietly powers thousands of business, rather than from consuming face apps alone. If pay-as-a can scale, chat, and pay responsibly while maintaining its financial strength, it could become a benchmark for others in the ecosystem, showing that it is possible to innovate boldly while earning the confidence of regulators, the banks, and investors. The coming months will be telling, as successes would be measured by how widely businesses adopt these new features, whether they upgrade ratings, translate into expanded financing options for SMEs, and whether pay-as-a can navigate the complexities of operating across multiple markets without compromising on security and affordability. For now, this milestone stands as a positive signal that Africa's tech ecosystem is producing increasingly sophisticated players capable of building the digital rails needed for the next phase of inclusive economic growth. The story of pay-as-a is still being written, but its recent achievements it reinforces an encouraging reality. With strong fundamental practical innovations and disciplined executions, African fintech companies can move beyond structured survival mode and they can start shaping a more mature, resilient digital economy that truly serves businesses and people across the continent. Wavers, what's your opinion on this story? Have you been using pay-as-a before now? And what has been your experience? What do you hope to benefit or gain as a business owner from this development? And to our next story, Pope Leo XIV called for peace in Cameroon and Angola. This follows his arrival in the region. The Pope high-profile masses in Douala and Angola has captured global attention. His messages urging an end to tyrannical rule and the exploitation, he has gone very viral, sparking intense debate about the intersection of religion and politics on the continent. Pope Leo has brought a powerful and outspoken message of peace to Central and Southern Africa during his ongoing apostolic journey. And this has captured global attention, and it has sparked intense debate about the role of religion in addressing political and social challenges on the continent. And as the first American-born Pope, Pope Leo XIV has used high-profile masses and public addresses in Cameroon and Angola to condemn violence, corruption, exploitation of resources, and what he described as the destructive actions of a powerful hand of tyrants who prioritizes war and profits from human dignity. The Pope arrived in Cameroon earlier in April 2026 as part of a four-nation African tour that also includes Angola and Equatorial Guinea. And in the port city of Douala, he celebrated a massive open-air mass at Diaspora Stadium, attended by around 120,000 faithful. There, he urged young people to reject violence and corruption, emphasizing generosity, hospitality, and care for one another. He highlighted the contrast between Cameroon's rich natural resources and the poverty many citizens face, linking it to broader issues of exploitation and poor governance. In the conflict-affected city of Bamenda in Cameroon's northwest region, the epicenter of nearly decade-long separatist crisis between Anglophone separatists and government forces that has claimed thousands of lives, Pope Leo delivered some of the most forceful remarks. He declared that the world is being ravaged by a handful of tyrants, and he criticized masters of war who spend billions on killings and devastation while pretending not to know how quickly peace can be destroyed. He called for an end to the circles of violence, and he urged political leaders to break the chains of corruption that would hinder development. This comment, delivered with direct and passionate styles, it went viral across social media. From Cameroon, the Pope traveled to Angola on April 18, 2026, where he continued the same strong theme. Upon arrival in Luanda, he challenged the country's leader to place the common good above particular interests and to break the circle of interests that have historically plundered African soil, the minerals, and other resources for external benefits while leaving many citizens in poverty. In meetings with authorities and during public events, he spoke against despotism, and he urged leaders not to fear dissent, and he reflected on Angola's painful history tied to the slave trade and colonial exploitations. The crowds gathered for his masses and his public appearances, including one in Kilamba area of Luanda. It was attended by around 200,000 people. These messages have resonated wildly, but it has also stirred controversies as his supporters see the Pope's words as a courageous moral stand on behalf of the suffering, especially in Cameroon's long-neglected Anglophone crisis and the resource-rich but inequality-stricken Angola. And many view it as a timely encouragement for peace processes and accountable governance on a continent where conflicts, corruptions, and resource crises continue to hinder progress. To understand this impact, let's look back a bit. Pope Leo XIV was elected in 2025 as the first U.S. Pope, and he has adopted a more direct and forceful speaking style compared to some of his predecessors. And this African trip, one of the longest and most ambitious, early in his pontificate, it builds on the Catholic Church's long tradition of social teaching that addresses justice, peace, and the dignity of the poor. Yet his blunt references to tyrants and exploitations come at a sensitive moment, coinciding with global tensions, including the public disagreement with U.S. President Donald Trump over issues like the Iran war. You can go back to our former episodes to have a look at that. We have treated that on a long scale. And the Vatican officials have stressed that his words are rooted in the gospel messages of peace, and they apply universally, not just targeting any specific individual or country exclusively. And on one hand, the Pope's intervention, it highlights the moral authority of religious leaders in Africa, where faith communities, they often wield significant influence in societies by grappling with weak institutions. His cause could amplify local peace efforts, it would encourage dialogue in Cameroon's separate regions, and pressure leaders in Angola to ensure resource wealth benefits ordinary citizens rather than just the elite or foreign interests. And the large crowd at the masses, it shows genuine popular hunger for messages of hope and justice. And critics have argued that while the Pope's intention may be pastoral, such direct political commentary, it risks blurring the line between spiritual guidance and interference in sovereign affairs. In Cameroon, some government supporters have pushed back against what they see as external judgment on internal conflicts, while in Angola, questions rise about whether religious leaders should name systemic exploitation so explicitly. Now, one of the tensions within the church itself is how far should a global pontiff go in confronting local power struggles without alienating his very Catholic communities he seeks to strengthen. And additionally, the viral nature of his remarks, he amplifies their reach, but it also opens them to selective interpretations or politicization, and sometimes turning a call for peace into fuel for further division. The continent faces multiple overlapping crises, with separatist insurgents, with resource-driven inequalities, government challenges, and the lingering effects of global economic pressures. So Pope Leo's arrival at a moment like this, where many Africans are demanding more accountability and fairer distribution of wealth, his emphasis on breaking chains of corruption and rejecting violence, it speaks to all of these frustrations. Yet, sustainable change requires more than moral exhortations. It depends on concrete political will, the institutional reforms, and inclusive dialogue involving all parties, including separatist movement and civil society. Some have praised the Pope for using his platform to amplify the voices of the marginalized and, the challenging the powerful interests, seeing it as a faithful to church social doctrine. And while others are worrying about the language about tyrants, that it could complicate the church's diplomatic relationship, or it could expose local Catholics to backlash in political challenge environments. Connecting these events creates a larger narrative. The Pope is using his early pontificate to assert a more assertive moral voice on global issue. And while Africa is serving as a key stage, his journey highlights both the continent's deep spiritual vitality and its persistent struggles with conflict and exploitation. The viral spread of his messages, it shows how religious leaders can still shape public discourse in the digital age. Yet, it also underscores the limit of such influence without accompanying action from governments and communities. As the Pope continues his journey and prepares to move to Equatorial Guinea, the debates he ignited will likely persist. Will his call for peace and justice inspire meaningful steps towards dialogue and reform in Cameroon and Angola, or will it just remain powerful but ultimately symbolic words in the face of entrenched political and economic realities? For millions of African Catholics and observers worldwide, this visit, it represents both hope for moral renewal and a reminder of how difficult translating faith-based appeals into lasting political and social changes can be. This situation continues to evolve with each stop on the papal journey, and reactions from the local leaders, the civil society, and international voices will shape its long-term resonance. Pope Leo XIV's outspoken stance has undeniably placed the intersection of religion, the politics, peace, and justice at the center of global attention this April 2026. We are closely following this story and will continue to give more updates as the journey continues. Waivers, what do you think of the Pope's expressions and, validity of his words? Are you in support, or do you think his Are you in support? Let's know in the comment section. And on our last story for today, there are two important developments in Southern and West Africa, which are currently trending because they show African countries are working together on practical projects that go beyond words and they actually deliver results. These stories remind many people of the old dream of Pan-Africanism, the idea that African nations should unite, they should cooperate, and solve problems as one family rather than staying isolated or depending on outside powers. The first one is about the Senku Bridge project between South Africa and Lesotho. Right now, on April 20, 2026, officials from both countries are preparing to unveil a massive tunnel boring machine, the TBM, at the Polyhali construction site. And this event is a build-up to the official launch of the completed Senku Bridge itself, which will happen on April 22, 2026 in Mokolong district of Lesotho. The Senku Bridge is a huge engineering achievement. It measures about 825 meters long and stands roughly 90 meters high, making it the largest of 3 major bridges being built under Phase 2 of the Lesotho Highlands Water Project. The bridge was constructed at a cost of around 2.4 billion rand. And its main purpose is to keep records open and communities connected even after the new Polyhali Dam creates a large reservoir that would otherwise flood existing routes. The bridge is not just about road and travels. It is a central part of a much bigger vision. The Phase 2 of the Lesotho Highland Water Project will increase the amount of water transferred from Lesotho mountains to South Africa's industrial and farming areas, while also generating more hydroelectric power for Lesotho. The tunnel boring machine that is being unveiled today will drill a 38-kilometer underground tunnel to connect the Polyhali and Katse reservoirs. And this machine is very enormous when fully assembled. It stretches hundreds of meters long and represents the kind of advanced technology and very investment that two neighboring African countries are using together to solve water and energy for millions of people. And looking back, the Lesotho Highlands Water Project started decades ago as a bold example of cross-border cooperations. Phase 1 was completed years earlier and already supplies a large portion of South Africa's water. So Phase 2 has had delays due to funding, technical challenges, and the sheer scale of the work, but steady progress is now visible. The Senku Bridge and the tunnel boring machine, it shows that patience, joint planning, and shared resources can turn big dreams into concrete reality. For ordinary people in the islands of Lesotho and in the water-stressed part of South Africa, this means better access to water, more reliable electricity, and improved roads that make daily life and trade easier. The project is a living example of practical Pan-Africanism in action. Two sovereign countries pooling money, expertise, political will to build infrastructure that benefits both sides. South Africa gets more water security for its economy, while Lesotho gains royalties, jobs during construction, and future hydropower. But yet, the questions would remain about how fairly the benefits are shared in long term. Will the local communities in Lesotho Mountains area see enough jobs? Will there be compensations for displaced lands and lasting development, or will the gain flow mostly to big companies and national capitals? Environmental impacts from large dams and reservoirs also needs to be carefully watched to protect ecosystems and the livelihoods of people who depend on the river. And some will argue that such mega projects can create new dependencies, one country relying heavily on the other for water, or that they repeat old patterns where smaller nations supply resources while larger ones gain the most economic advantage. However, African countries choosing to invest in each other instead of always looking to Europe, China, or America for every major project. The Senku Bridge and the tunnel machine They are visible symbols that regional cooperation can deliver tangible results like water, power, and better connectivity. The spirit of practical cooperation between African neighbors, it leads naturally into the second story that's also trending right now. Nigeria and South Africa have just finalized a strategic maritime partnership between their two navies. The two countries recently concluded their first ever high-level naval staff talks in Cape Town, South Africa from April 12 to 18, 2026. These talks produced a clear framework for sustained collaboration on maritime security, including protecting sea lanes, fighting piracy and illegal fishing, sharing intelligence, and conducting joint training and exercises. Nigeria and South Africa are two largest economies on the continent and both have significant coastlines and important ports. And their navies coming together in this formal way, it marks a real milestone in continental defense relations. The partnership is expected to grow further, with the South African Navy planning to participate in the Nigerian Navy's 70th anniversary celebration in June 2026. The goal is not just bilateral friendship, but to contribute to safer waters across wider parts of Africa, where illegal activities at sea cost economics billions every year and threaten food security and trade. The secure branch, collecting these stories, it gives us a fuller picture of modern Pan-Africanism at work. As the secure bridge, it represents physical cooperation on land, building bridges, the tunnels, and water systems that all link economies and improve lives across border. And the Nigerian-South African Naval Pact, it represents cooperation at sea, protecting shared maritime spaces to that trade, with fishing and energy routes remain safe and open for everyone. Together, they all show African nations moving from just talking about unity and actually doing concrete things, sharing engineering know-how on one side and sharing security expertise on the other. True Pan-Africanism in 2026 is no longer just about grand speeches or political slogans from the 19th independence era. It's becoming more practical and project-based, with countries learning that working together on specific needs, whether water security between Lesotho and South Africa or maritime safety between Nigeria and South Africa, they all build trust faster than endless summits. These partnerships also reduce over dependence on outside powers, because when African countries solve their own infrastructure and security problems jointly, they gain stronger bargaining power in the wider world. And critics may say, oh, such bilateral deals between big players like South Africa and Nigeria could leave smaller countries feeling sidelined, or that progress is still too slow compared to the huge challenges Africa face. But that's my worry, that military cooperations could be misused or used to create new tensions. But this risk also sees in a positive direction, in the sense that step-by-step collaboration that delivers real benefit, like water from farms and industries, shipping routes for exports, jobs during construction and operations. When these projects succeed, they just prove that African solutions can work. And in the end, both the Senku Bridge with its impressive tunnel boring machine and the Nigerian-South African naval partnerships, they are powerful examples of Pan-Africanism in action today. One builds physical links across rivers and mountains, the other builds security links across oceans. Together, they remind us that when African nations choose to invest time, when they choose to invest money and expertise in one another, the continent becomes stronger, it becomes more reliant, it becomes better to be able to face the future. These stories show that the dream of unity is slowly turning into everyday realities that ordinary Nigerians can see, they can feel, the better waters, the safer seas, and stronger neighborhood bonds. The journey is still very long, but visible progress like this, it gives real hope that practical Pan-Africanism can deliver meaningful change for the continent and its people. And to wrap this up, the stories we have discussed today, From the high-stake diplomacy in Beijing and Nairobi to the grounded realities of aviation crisis and property disputes, all of this point to a single, inescapable conclusion. Africa is moving out of the era of empty promise and into the era of brutal accountability. Whether it is a diaspora investor demanding justice in Washington, an airline operator facing a 300% fuel spike, or a diplomat navigating a new tariff-free world, the central tension remains the same. We are seeing a continent attempting to build a high-speed future on a foundation that still requires significant structural reinforcement. And as we move forward, the question for every stakeholder, every government, every private sector, and every citizen alike is, it's just no longer what can we build, but how can we build it so that it lasts? Because true sustainable growth will not just be measured by the number of groundbreakings or the scale of summits, but by the reliability of our institutions, by the sanctity of property rights, and the safety of the systems that connect our economies. For Waves, our mission remains to cut through the noise of the news circle to find these patterns. We are watching the outcomes of the DC protest, the practical implementation of the Chinese tariff agreement, and the survival of our domestic carriers. This is the reality of the continent in 2026. It is messy, it is complex, and it is undeniably fiercely alive. So, stay connected, stay informed, and most importantly, stay critical. Because these headlines are just beginning. The real story is what we do with this information tomorrow. So if you found this deep dive valuable, please hit the like subscription, hit the button, share to your network, subscribe to Waves, just to ensure that you never miss our analysis of the trends shaping the African continent. Thank you for joining us. I am your host, Iyanoluwa Bamishile. See you tomorrow.